The air inside Orion Prime's Grand Hall crackled with anticipation. 5,000 of the unified kingdom's most influential citizens filled the auditorium. Military officers in pressed uniforms, politicians in formal attire, journalists with recording devices hovering nearby. The hall's architecture was deliberately intimidating, soaring crystal pillars that captured and amplified light, creating an almost divine aura around whoever stood at the central podium. Lieutenant Milo Exer shifted uncomfortably in his formal military dress. The tight collar bit into his neck, a constant reminder that he was an outsider here. As one of only 17 humans in attendance, he felt the weight of alien gazes upon him, some curious, most dismissive, a few openly hostile. "Stop fidgeting," whispered Captain Rhea Kale beside him. "You're representing Earth's diplomatic corps, remember?" Milo nodded stiffly. He and Rhea had served together during the Third Galactic War's final campaign. While he'd remained military, she'd transitioned to battlefield medicine, earning respect across species boundaries for her work in xenobiology. Her presence was the only reason he'd agreed to attend this celebration. "I still don't understand why they needed me here," Milo muttered, watching the procession of Orion officials filing onto the stage. 5 years since the peace treaty, and suddenly they want Earth representatives at every function. Rhea's eyes, unnaturally green from adaptive implants, narrowed slightly. "Politics, Milo. The kingdom needs to maintain appearances of inclusivity." She paused, then added more softly, "Though I admit, something feels off about today." Before Milo could press her for details, the lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the central podium, and a hushed reverence fell over the crowd. General Lyron Vox, Supreme Commander of the Orion Military Forces, strode forward with the mechanical precision that had made him legendary on 100 battlefields. Vox was intimidating even by Orion standards, nearly 7 feet tall with steel-gray skin that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. His most distinctive feature was his jawline, reinforced with cybernetic implants that gave him a perpetually stern expression. Rumors claimed the augmentation was necessary after he'd survived a direct plasma blast during the Battle of Proxima Centauri. "Distinguished guests, noble representatives of the unified kingdom," Vox's voice resonated through the hall's acoustic enhancement system. "Today marks 5 years since we established lasting peace across our territories. 5 years of prosperity, security, and progress." Polite applause rippled through the audience. Milo remained still, his eyes fixed on the general. He'd faced Vox's forces on 3 separate occasions during the war. Each time, Earth's defenses had barely held. "The future of Orion space has never been more promising," Vox continued, his metallic jawline catching the light as he spoke. "Our scientific advancements, military preparedness, and diplomatic initiatives have secured our position as the dominant force in this quadrant of the galaxy." The general paused, surveying the crowd with cold efficiency. His gaze lingered momentarily on the small Earth delegation. However, his tone shifted subtly. "Progress requires honest assessment. As we plan our next century of expansion, we must acknowledge certain limitations among our allies." Milo felt a chill run down his spine. Beside him, Rhea tensed. "The integration of Earth into our alliance has provided valuable perspective," Vox continued. "Their resourcefulness is commendable, their adaptability interesting, but candor compels me to address the fundamental weakness at the core of human physiology and psychology." Murmurs rippled through the audience. The other human representatives shifted uncomfortably. "Humans are simply too soft," Vox declared, his augmented jaw clicking slightly as he emphasized each word. "Their bones break under standard gravity shifts. Their skin tears from routine environmental exposures. Their lungs struggle with basic atmospheric variations. Milo's hands clenched into fists. He'd lost 37 comrades during the Io offensive when Orion forces had deliberately altered the atmospheric composition. But more concerning than their physical fragility is their emotional weakness, Vox continued, his voice dripping with contempt. They form attachments that compromise tactical judgment. They hesitate when efficiency demands action. They question orders that serve the greater good. The general gestured toward display screens that materialized around the hall. Our scientific division has conducted extensive studies. The data is conclusive. Human empathy is a design flaw that renders them fundamentally unsuitable for leadership roles in our expanding kingdom. Images appeared on the screens, humans in various states of distress during simulated crisis scenarios. Milo recognized the footage from joint training exercises that had actually been stress tests conducted without proper consent. Therefore, Vox's voice hardened. I propose a reassessment of Earth's role within our alliance. Their status should reflect their capabilities as auxiliary support, not equal partners. Their representatives should serve in advisory capacities only, without voting rights in the Galactic Council. A wave of approving nods swept through the audience. Milo felt his pulse pounding in his temples. Everything the peace treaty had established, Earth's sovereignty, equal representation, protection from exploitation, was being systematically undermined in a single speech. Their softness makes them excellent servants but poor leaders, Vox continued, his voice rising. Perhaps, in time, with proper genetic engineering, they might evolve beyond these limitations. Until then, something snapped inside Milo. 5 years of buried rage, of watching his planet's resources drained under fair trade agreements, of enduring condescension from beings who'd never faced Earth's unique challenges. It all surged through him like molten steel. Before he fully realized what he was doing, Milo moved. His military-grade neural implants, the same ones Orion intelligence had failed to detect, activated automatically in response to his adrenaline spike. Time seemed to slow as his enhanced reflexes took over. He crossed the 30 feet to the stage in less than 2 seconds. Security personnel, caught off guard by the speed of his movement, barely had time to reach for their weapons. In one fluid motion, Milo vaulted onto the platform and closed the distance to Vox. The general turned, surprise briefly flashing across his usually impassive face. His enhanced jaw opened to issue a command. Milo's right hand shot out, fingers finding the precise point where cybernetic implant met organic tissue. With a savage twist that channeled years of combat training and pent-up fury, he snapped the general's reinforced jaw sideways with a sickening crack. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent hall. Vox staggered backward, dark fluid leaking from the damaged connection points. His security detail froze in momentary shock. No one had ever successfully laid hands on the legendary general, let alone damaged his prized augmentation. Milo stood over the fallen commander, chest heaving. "Humans aren't soft, General," he said, his voice carrying through the hall's perfect acoustics. "We're resilient. We bend so we don't break. And when pushed too far," he gestured to Vox's damaged jaw, "we push back." The moment of stunned silence shattered. Security forces swarmed the stage. Energy weapons hummed to life. Milo made no move to resist as they surrounded him, his moment of defiance already accomplishing more than he'd intended. As they dragged him away, he caught Rhea's eye in the crowd. Her expression wasn't shocked or horrified, it was calculating, almost approving. She gave him the slightest nod before disappearing into the chaos that had erupted throughout the grand hall. Milo's last glimpse before they removed him from the hall was of the mighty General Vox being helped to his feet, one hand clutching his partially detached jaw. his eyes burning with humiliation and rage. The cell they threw him into was designed for non-humans. The lighting pulsed at a frequency that triggered mild nausea in human physiology. The atmospheric mix contained trace elements that made each breath feel slightly inadequate. These oversights were deliberate, Orion's passive-aggressive reminder of human frailty. Milo sat on the hard metal bench, examining the bruises forming on his wrists, where the restraints had been unnecessarily tight. In the 6 hours since his arrest, he'd been processed, scanned, and isolated without a single word spoken to him directly. All communications had been through automated systems or guards who pretended he couldn't understand their language. He closed his eyes, replaying the moment over and over. The satisfying crack of the general's jaw, the look of shock that had briefly replaced Vox's perpetual contempt, the surge of something primal and vindicating that had coursed through him as he'd struck back against years of humiliation. Was it worth it? The treaty would likely remain intact. Earth was too valuable as a resource hub to discard entirely, but his action would have consequences. Personal consequences, certainly, but possibly wider diplomatic repercussions as well. The cell door hissed open. Milo opened his eyes to see Major Varos, an old comrade from joint military operations during the war, standing in the doorway. His posture was rigid with disapproval. "Of all the reckless, idiotic stunts," Varos began, his voice low and tight. He stepped inside, allowing the door to seal behind him. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Milo straightened, meeting his former friend's gaze. "Defended the dignity of our species, perhaps. Assaulted the highest-ranking military officer in the unified kingdom," Varos corrected sharply, "in front of 5,000 witnesses and countless more watching the broadcast." "He was advocating for our effective enslavement," Milo countered, "dismantling the treaty protections piece by piece." "And your response was to physically attack him?" Varos paced the small cell. "We're diplomats now, Milo. We use words, negotiations, political maneuvering. Those tactics haven't exactly been working, have they?" Milo gestured around them. 5 years of polite acquiescence. And where has it gotten us? Our resources stripped, our influence minimized, our people treated as curiosities at best and servants at worst. Varos stopped pacing. "There are channels, protocols." "Their channels, their protocols." Milo stood suddenly, causing Varos to step back instinctively. "Face it, old friend, we've been playing a rigged game." Something flickered in Varos's eyes, doubt, perhaps, or a momentary acknowledgement of truth, but his military discipline quickly reasserted itself. "The Orion High Council has scheduled your trial for tomorrow," he said formally. "The charges are severe: aggravated assault against a government official, disruption of a state function, incitement to interspecies conflict." Milo absorbed this without visible reaction. "And the penalties?" Varos hesitated. "Execution or permanent exile beyond kingdom borders." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken history. They both knew what exile beyond borders meant: being abandoned in contested space, where survival was measured in hours, not days. "They're making an example of me," Milo observed. "What did you expect?" Varos's voice rose slightly. "You attacked their most decorated military hero during a broadcast ceremony." "I expected nothing," Milo replied calmly. "I didn't plan it." Varos, in that moment, watching him systematically dehumanize us, I just reacted. "That's exactly the lack of control they've always accused us of having," Varos said, but his conviction seemed to waver. "I've been assigned as your official representative, but there's little I can do. The evidence is incontrovertible." Milo nodded slowly. "I understand." Varos moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, Many of us have wanted to do exactly what you did, but wanting and doing are different things. Sometimes the doing is what matters, Milo replied. After Varos left, Milo returned to the bench. The adrenaline had long since faded, leaving him exhausted but strangely clear-headed. He didn't regret his action, not the core of it anyway, but he questioned its effectiveness. Had he merely reinforced the stereotype of humans as emotionally volatile, or had he demonstrated that there were lines that could not be crossed without consequence? His contemplation was interrupted by a subtle change in the cell's lighting. The nauseating pulse slowed, then stopped altogether, shifting to a steady illumination that was easier on human eyes. Moments later, the ventilation system hummed briefly, and the air quality improved noticeably. Milo tensed, sensing that these changes weren't random malfunctions. His suspicion was confirmed when a small section of the wall beside the door shimmered and became transparent, revealing a maintenance corridor beyond. Captain Rhea Kale stepped through the temporary opening, which sealed seamlessly behind her. She wore medical corps attire but carried a military-grade neural disruptor at her hip. "You've caused quite the uproar, Lieutenant," she said, her tone professional but her eyes gleaming with something like approval. Milo stood. "How did you—" "Override the security protocols?" She smiled slightly. "The medical corps has access to all detention facilities. Something about preventing litigation over inadequate prisoner care." She moved closer, activating a small device that emitted a low-frequency hum, a counter-surveillance measure. "We don't have much time," she continued, her voice dropping. "What you did today, it wasn't just personal, was it? You felt it too, something calculated about Vox's speech." Milo nodded slowly. It was too perfect, the evidence too ready, the proposal too detailed, like he was laying groundwork. "Exactly." Rhea's expression turned grim. "For the past 6 months, I've been tracking unusual patterns in the kingdom's research facilities. Experimental procedures, genetic mapping of human subjects, development of specialized chemical compounds that affect human physiology specifically." A cold dread settled in Milo's stomach. "You think Vox's speech was preparation for something more concrete?" "I know it was." She extracted a small neural drive from her pocket. "This contains classified research directives authorized by Vox personally. They're developing what they're calling compliance protocols for Earth's population, behavioral modification through atmospheric dispersal agents." Milo stared at the innocuous-looking device. "Chemical subjugation?" "On a planetary scale," Rhea confirmed. "Scheduled for implementation within 3 months. Today's speech was meant to establish political justification before they proceeded." The revelation hit Milo like a physical blow. His impulsive act of defiance suddenly seemed trivial compared to the threat facing his entire species. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Though he suspected the answer, Rhea's gaze was steady. "Because you've already made yourself the lightning rod. Your trial tomorrow will be broadcast across the kingdom. Every eye will be on you, the violent human who proved Vox's point about our inherent instability. Unless we use that attention to expose their plans," Milo concluded. "Exactly." She handed him the neural drive. "This contains enough evidence to turn public opinion against Vox, particularly among the non-military species in the Alliance. Many of them have privately expressed concerns about the General's increasingly authoritarian tendencies." Milo took the drive, his mind racing. "Varos said the trial is tomorrow. I'll be heavily guarded, and the proceedings will be tightly controlled." "Which is why we're not waiting for the trial." Rhea activated her wrist console, bringing up a schematic of the detention center. "In approximately 40 minutes, the facility will experience a Level 3 security protocol failure. Emergency procedures will necessitate your temporary relocation to a secondary holding area." Milo raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, you've arranged for that relocation to take an unexpected detour. Let's just say the transport vehicle might experience navigational issues. She smiled grimly. But this isn't about escape, Milo. It's about getting you to the central communications hub, where you can broadcast the contents of that drive during peak viewing hours. The plan was audacious, possibly suicidal. And after the broadcast? Ria's expression hardened. After that, it won't matter what happens to either of us. The truth will be public, and the Alliance members who still value autonomy will be forced to act against Vox's faction. Milo weighed the neural drive in his palm. From impulsive defender of human dignity to potential savior of his species, all in less than 24 hours. The irony wasn't lost on him. There's something else you should know, Ria said, checking the time on her console. The medical team that treated Vox after your intervention discovered something unusual. His neural patterns showed signs of external influence, subtle control algorithms embedded in his cybernetic enhancements. Milo frowned. You're saying he's being manipulated? Not exactly, more like enhanced. His natural tendencies toward militarism and xenophobia are being amplified, directed. She looked troubled. Whoever is behind it, they're using Vox as the perfect figurehead while implementing a much larger agenda. The facility's lighting flickered briefly, the first sign of the coming security failure. We have to move soon, Ria said, handing him a small injector. This contains a temporary enhancement compound. It will accelerate your neural processing and physical responses for approximately 6 hours. You'll need it to overcome the security forces you'll encounter. Milo eyed the device warily. Side effects? Significant, she admitted. Potential neurological damage, cellular degradation. It's still experimental. Designed for humans specifically. Her silence was answer enough. The compound was part of the very research she was trying to expose, weaponized against its creators. Milo took the injector. The things we do for home, he muttered, pressing it against his neck. The liquid fire entered his bloodstream, spreading rapidly through his system. The effect was immediate and disorienting. His senses sharpened painfully. The hum of the ventilation system became a roar. The cell's lighting burned into his retinas. Every nerve ending seemed to awaken simultaneously. Focus! Ria's voice cut through the sensory overload. Channel it. Remember your training. Milo closed his eyes, employing the mental disciplines he'd learned during special operations. Gradually, the chaos receded, replaced by a crystalline clarity. When he opened his eyes again, the world had slowed around him, details previously invisible now sharply defined. Better, Ria asked, her words seeming to stretch in his enhanced perception. He nodded, experimentally flexing his fingers. His body felt both lighter and more substantial, as if he'd suddenly become more fully connected to it. The alarm will sound in exactly 90 seconds, she said, checking her console one final time. Follow the route I've programmed. I'll meet you at the communications hub. As she turned to leave, Milo caught her arm. Why are you doing this, Ria? You're risking everything. She looked back at him, her enhanced green eyes reflecting his own image. Because during the war, I saw what humans are capable of, not just destruction, but creation, not just survival, but compassion. The galaxy needs that perspective, especially now. With that, she slipped back through the temporary opening in the wall, which sealed behind her as if it had never existed. Milo positioned himself by the cell door, the neural drive secured in a hidden pocket, the enhancement compound racing through his system. In 87 seconds, he would begin a journey that would either save his people or condemn him as the greatest traitor in Earth's history. Either way, General Vox's broken jaw would be just the beginning. The security failure began exactly as Ria had predicted. First, the subtle dimming of lights throughout the facility, followed by the low drone of backup systems activating. Then, more dramatically, the unmistakable wail of containment breach alarms echoed through the corridors. Milo's cell door slid open automatically as emergency protocols redirected power from non-essential systems. He stepped into the corridor, his enhanced senses mapping his surroundings with preternatural clarity. The compound coursing through his veins made everything appear in hyper-definition. The microscopic imperfections in the metallic walls, the barely perceptible flicker of emergency lighting, the distant footfalls of guards responding to the crisis. Following Ria's programmed route, he moved through the detention center with precision. The enhancement compound allowed him to process information at accelerated rates, calculating optimal paths and predicting patrol patterns before they materialized. When he encountered a 3-guard security team, he neutralized them with efficiency that would have been impossible without chemical assistance, moving so quickly that the final guard was unconscious before the first one hit the floor. But the compound exacted its price. Each surge of enhanced activity sent waves of pain through his nervous system. Twice he had to stop, leaning against walls as blood vessels in his eyes ruptured from the internal pressure. His body wasn't designed for this level of performance. It was burning itself from the inside out. He reached the facility's vehicle bay just as an automated transport was being prepared for emergency prisoner relocation. Disabling the 2 technicians with precise strikes to nerve clusters, Milo commandeered the vehicle and initiated the pre-programmed navigation sequence Ria had installed. As the transport glided through Orion Prime's lower atmospheric lanes, Milo assessed his condition. The enhancement compound was still functioning, but his body was showing signs of rejection. Fine tremors ran through his hands. Occasional visual distortions blurred his perception. Most concerning was the cognitive fluctuation, moments of brilliant clarity interrupted by dangerous confusion. The transport descended toward a nondescript building in the government district, the Central Communications Hub, heart of the kingdom's information network. From here, all official broadcasts were coordinated and all public communications monitored. It was, by design, one of the most secure facilities on the planet. Landing on a service platform, Milo abandoned the transport and followed the next phase of Ria's plan. A maintenance access card, presumably acquired through her medical connections, granted him entry to the lower levels of the facility. Moving through service corridors and utility shafts, he avoided the main security checkpoints. His enhanced senses detected Ria's presence before he saw her, the unique pattern of her breathing, the specific cadence of her movements, details that would have been imperceptible without chemical enhancement. She emerged from a recessed doorway, her medical uniform replaced by technical staff attire. "You made it," she observed, noting his physical deterioration with professional concern. "The compound is breaking down faster than expected." "I'm functional," Milo replied, the words requiring more effort than they should have. "What's next?" "The broadcast control center is 2 levels up," she explained, leading him toward a restricted elevator. "During shift change, there's a 3-minute window when the biometric scanners recalibrate. We'll use that window to access the main transmission floor." As they waited for the right moment, Milo examined the neural drive containing evidence of Vox's plans. Such a small device to hold such devastating information. "What made you start investigating Vox in the first place?" he asked. Ria's expression darkened. 6 months ago, a research patient, a human child brought to my facility with a rare neurological condition, disappeared from the medical center. Official records claimed transfer to a specialized treatment facility, but when I investigated, no such facility existed. She paused, the memory clearly painful. I found her 3 weeks later in a military research installation. They were using her unique neural patterns to develop targeted control mechanisms for human subjects. You couldn't report it through official channels? I tried. Her bitter laugh held no humor. The complaint was classified, then buried. My security clearance was nearly revoked. That's when I realized how deep the corruption goes. The elevator panel indicated the beginning of shift change. Rhea activated her bypass module, and the doors opened silently. Once we reach the broadcast center, we'll have approximately 4 minutes before security protocols identify the unauthorized transmission. She continued as they ascended. The neural drive is set to auto-deploy its contents when connected to the main console. All you need to do is insert it and activate the emergency broadcast function. Milo nodded, then winced as another wave of pain surged through his system. The enhancement compound was becoming more liability than asset. After the broadcast? He asked, already suspecting the answer. Rhea met his gaze directly. There is no extraction plan, Milo. This is a one-way mission. He nodded. He'd known from the moment he'd taken the neural drive that there would be no return to normal life. Some actions changed your path irrevocably. The elevator stopped. The doors opened onto a surprisingly ordinary-looking office environment, workstations arranged in concentric circles around a central transmission hub. The shift change was in progress, with technical staff exchanging information as they traded positions. Now, Rhea whispered, guiding him through the controlled chaos. They moved with purposeful confidence, their borrowed uniforms and authoritative manner deflecting casual scrutiny. In situations like this, Milo knew, acting as if you belonged was often more effective than any disguise. They reached the central hub, a raised platform containing the master control console. Rhea positioned herself at an adjacent station, fingers flying over the interface as she established a secondary access point. Ready, she murmured, the drive. Milo extracted the neural drive from his pocket, hand trembling slightly as another wave of compound-induced pain washed over him. As he reached toward the console's input port, a voice cut through the ambient noise of the transmission center. I wouldn't do that, Lieutenant Xir. Milo froze, then turned slowly. General Lyron Vox stood at the entrance to the hub, flanked by 4 elite guards. His damaged jaw had been hastily repaired, the imperfect reconstruction giving his face an even more menacing aspect. His eyes, cold as deep space, fixed on the neural drive in Milo's hand. Captain Kale, Vox continued, his voice distorted by the jaw injury. Your security clearance has been quite useful to us. We've been tracking your movements for weeks, waiting to see where your investigation would lead. Rhea paled but maintained her composure. Then you know what we've discovered. I know you've misinterpreted classified research, Vox replied smoothly. The compliance protocols are for Earth's protection, not subjugation. Human physiology requires assistance to thrive in our alliance. Assistance that conveniently renders us docile and compliant, Milo challenged, his enhanced senses detecting the subtle signs of deception in Vox's biometric readings. The general's damaged jaw clicked as he attempted a condescending smile. You continue to demonstrate why such measures are necessary. Your species reacts emotionally rather than rationally. You mistake benevolence for control. Enough lies, Rhea said, her finger hovering over her console. The broadcast will proceed. Vox signaled, and his guards raised their weapons. Consider carefully, Dr. Kyle, your distinguished career, your research, all can continue if you recognize the error in your judgment. The compound you provided to Lieutenant Xir proves you're not above using our research when it suits your purpose. Milo glanced at Rhea, whose expression confirmed Vox's implication. The enhancement compound hadn't been stolen. It had been her own work, repurposed against its intended application. The difference, she replied steadily, is consent. We choose our sacrifices. You would deny us even that dignity. Vox's patience visibly thinned. Guards, secure the neural drive and detain the prisoners. As the guards advanced, time seemed to slow for Milo. The enhancement compound, despite its deteriorating effect, gave him one final surge of hyper-awareness. He saw multiple scenarios unfold simultaneously in his mind: fight patterns, escape routes, probable outcomes. None ended with both the broadcast succeeding and their survival. "Rhea," he said quietly, making his decision, "initiate secondary protocol." She understood immediately, her fingers executing a complex sequence on her console. Warning lights flashed across the transmission center as security partitions began to deploy, temporarily separating them from Vox and his guards. "You have 20 seconds, she said, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Milo inserted the neural drive into the console, bypassing the standard authentication with techniques he'd learned during covert operations. The drive connected, its contents transferring to the broadcast system. Vox's voice came through the security partition, cold with fury. "This changes nothing. Human, you've merely accelerated our timeline." "Perhaps," Milo replied, activating the final sequence. "Or perhaps I'm about to change everything." The broadcast initiated, overriding all channels across the unified kingdom. Vox's classified directives, research protocols, and implementation plans streamed into the public consciousness, irrefutable evidence of conspiracy against not just Earth, but any species deemed unsuitable for the General's vision of galactic order. As the data flowed, the security partitions began to retract. Vox and his guards advanced, weapons raised. Rhea moved to Milo's side, her work complete. "It's done," she said simply. Milo nodded, feeling the enhancement compound reach critical failure in his system. His vision blurred, muscles spasming as the artificial stimulants turned toxic, but his purpose remained clear. As Vox reached the platform, fury distorting his features, Milo summoned his remaining strength. In a movement that echoed their first confrontation, he lunged forward, not with blind rage this time, but with calculated purpose. His hand found the weak point in Vox's hastily repaired jaw, fingers applying precise pressure to the neural interface that connected machine to flesh. With one decisive twist, he completed what he'd started in the Grand Hall. The General's jaw didn't merely break this time. It detached completely, taking with it the primary neural control module that Rhea's research had identified. Without that interface, the external influence amplifying Vox's actions would be severed. Vox staggered backward, dark fluid pouring from the exposed cybernetic connections. His guards hesitated, momentarily stunned by the gruesome spectacle of their commander's partial disassembly. That hesitation was all Rhea needed. She activated the final phase of their plan, an emergency signal to Allied representatives who had been positioned to act once the evidence was public. The transmission center doors burst open as a joint security team, composed of members from 3 different Alliance species, flooded the area. They moved with coordinated efficiency, disarming Vox's guards and securing the General himself. "General Lyran Vox," announced the team leader, a tall Deltanian whose transparent exoskeleton revealed complex thought patterns flowing through her neural pathways. "By authority of the Alliance Security Council, you are detained pending investigation of crimes against multiple sovereign species." Milo watched through failing vision as Vox was restrained. The proud general reduced to communicating through crude hand gestures, his primary speech mechanism lying useless on the floor. "The broadcast?" Milo asked Rhea, his voice barely audible as the enhancement compound completed its devastating cycle. "Received across all 87 systems," she confirmed, supporting him as his legs threatened to give way. "The Alliance Council has already convened an emergency session. Vox's faction is being systematically contained." Relief washed over him, momentarily overwhelming even the compound's effects. "Worth it," he murmured as darkness crept into the edges of his consciousness. The last thing he saw before collapsing was Vox being led away, the general's eyes fixed on him with a hatred that transcended species, politics, and even language. In that gaze, Milo recognized something he'd felt himself on distant battlefields, the cold realization that you had grievously underestimated your enemy. Humans weren't soft, after all. They were simply waiting for the right moment to demonstrate their strength. Consciousness returned to Milo in fragments. First, disconnected sensations, the subtle vibration of medical equipment, the antiseptic scent of a treatment facility, the distant murmur of voices speaking in multiple languages. Then, more coherently, an awareness of his physical state, the dull ache of muscles recovering from severe strain, the heaviness of limbs subjected to regenerative therapy, the peculiar emptiness that followed neural detoxification. He opened his eyes to a room designed with human physiology in mind, lighting calibrated to Earth standards, temperature and humidity precisely regulated, even the subtle background sounds mimicking the ambient noise of a terrestrial environment. Someone had gone to considerable effort to make this space comfortable for him. "Welcome back, Lieutenant." Rhea sat beside his bed, her medical uniform replaced by the formal attire of an Alliance representative. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had finally completed a marathon task. "How long?" Milo asked, his voice rough from disuse. 17 days, she replied, checking the monitors displaying his vital signs. "The enhancement compound did extensive damage to your nervous system. We had to put you in stasis while the regeneration protocols ran their course." Milo attempted to sit up, wincing as his body protested the movement. Rhea assisted him, adjusting the bed to a more comfortable position. "Vox?" he asked once he was settled. "In custody, awaiting trial before the full Alliance Council." Her expression turned grim. "The neural control module you extracted from his jaw provided the final evidence we needed. He wasn't just planning to subjugate Earth, he was himself being manipulated by a faction within Orion military intelligence. They were using him as the perfect weapon, his natural tendencies toward order and discipline amplified to pathological levels." Milo absorbed this information, finding it both disturbing and strangely vindicating. So my act of emotional instability actually exposed a rational conspiracy. "Ironic, isn't it?" Rhea smiled slightly. "Your very human reaction, the thing they claimed made your species unsuitable, was exactly what was needed to break their carefully constructed plan." She handed him a data tablet displaying news feeds from across the Alliance. The headlines told a story of rapid political realignment, Alliance Council reforms voting procedures, Earth representatives gain expanded authority, Orion military leadership undergoes comprehensive review. "The broadcast changed everything," Rhea explained, "not just for Earth, but for all the secondary species within the Alliance. Vox's plans included subtle subjugation protocols for any race deemed insufficiently aligned with Orion interests. And the faction behind him? Still being identified and contained, it appears to have been a long-term operation, decades in development." She hesitated, then added, "There's something else you should know. Major Varos was instrumental in coordinating the Alliance response once the broadcast went live." Milo raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Varos? The same man who lectured me about protocols and proper channels?" "The very same," Rhea confirmed. "Apparently, your act of defiance forced him to confront contradictions he'd been avoiding. When the evidence was broadcast, he was among the first military officers to publicly denounce Vox's faction." A nurse entered, human, Milo noted with interest, to adjust his medication and check his progress. After she left, Rhea's expression turned more serious. "There will be a hearing once you're fully recovered," she said. Technically, you did assault a high-ranking official and breach multiple security protocols, but given the circumstances and the outcome, it's largely a formality. Milo nodded, understanding the political necessity. The Alliance needed to maintain its structural integrity while accommodating the dramatic shifts in power his actions had precipitated. "And you?" he asked. "The compound you gave me, it was your research, wasn't it?" Ria's gaze dropped momentarily. "Yes, I was developing it as a temporary combat enhancement for emergency medical personnel, a way to give field medics the capacity to reach and treat wounded in high-risk situations." She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "I never intended it for military application. When I discovered how similar compounds were being weaponized in Vox's program, I repurposed my work." "At significant risk to yourself," Milo observed. "We all make our choices," she replied simply. A comfortable silence fell between them, two soldiers who had found an unexpected path to peace through conflict. Eventually, Milo asked the question that had been forming as his mind cleared. What happens now to Earth, to the Alliance, to us? Earth's position within the Alliance has been substantially strengthened, Ria said, her professional demeanor returning. The evidence revealed that human softness, our empathy, our adaptability, our willingness to sacrifice for abstract principles isn't a weakness but a different kind of strength, one that the Alliance desperately needs as a counterbalance to purely pragmatic governance. She stood, moving to the window that overlooked Orion Prime's governmental district. In the distance, the grand hall where everything had begun was visible, its crystalline spires catching the light of the system's primary star. "As for us," she continued, "that depends on what you want. Milo, you've become something of a symbol, the human who broke a general's jaw and, in doing so, possibly saved the Alliance from internal collapse." Milo considered this. He had never sought recognition or influence. His act had been impulsive, born of accumulated frustration rather than calculated heroism. Yet its consequences had rippled far beyond anything he could have anticipated. "I want what I've always wanted," he said finally, "to ensure Earth's security and sovereignty, to build an alliance that values diversity of thought and approach rather than imposing uniformity." Ria turned back to him, a slight smile touching her lips. "Then you'll be pleased to know that the Alliance Council has requested your input on the restructuring of interspecies protocols. Once you're recovered, of course." The irony wasn't lost on him, the soldier who had violated every diplomatic protocol now being asked to help redesign them, but perhaps that was precisely the point. Sometimes systems needed to be broken before they could be properly rebuilt. "And Vox?" he asked. "What will happen to him?" "That's still being determined," Ria replied. "The neural control module's influence complicates assessments of personal responsibility. Some argue for leniency given the manipulation. Others point out that his natural tendencies made him the perfect vessel for the faction's agenda." Milo nodded thoughtfully. The question of free will versus influence was one humans had debated for millennia without resolution. A soft chime indicated that his recovery period for the day was ending. His system still needed rest to complete the healing process. As Ria prepared to leave, Milo caught her hand. "Thank you," he said simply, "not just for the rescue, but for seeing what others missed, for believing that softness isn't weakness." She squeezed his hand gently. "Rest now. The Alliance will still be there when you wake up, a little more human, perhaps, than it was before." After she left, Milo lay back, contemplating the chain of events that had led to this moment. One impulsive act of defiance, breaking the jaw of a general mid-speech, had cascaded into systemic change across 87 worlds. It wasn't the act itself that had mattered, but what it represented, the refusal to accept dehumanization, the insistence on dignity even at great personal cost. As sleep began to reclaim him, Milo thought about the paradox at the heart of the human condition. They called us soft, he reflected, because we bend rather than break, because we feel deeply, connect widely, adapt constantly. But in that softness lies our greatest strength, the capacity to absorb pressure and transform it into something new. Sometimes, the softest substances prove the most resilient when tested, and sometimes it takes a broken jaw to start a conversation that truly matters. 3 months later, Milo stood at the observation deck of the newly commissioned Alliance Embassy on Earth. The structure, a harmonious blend of architectural styles from 7 different member species, symbolized the transformed relationship between Earth and its galactic partners. From this vantage point, he could see the sprawling recovery zones, where war damage was still being repaired, alongside vibrant new developments that incorporated advanced Orion technology adapted for human use. "Quite a view," observed Major Varos, joining him at the railing. Their relationship had evolved from strained to cautiously respectful in the wake of recent events. "Your home world recovers quickly." "Adaptation is our specialty," Milo replied, both physical and philosophical. Varos nodded, his formal military bearing slightly relaxed. "The final treaty amendments will be ratified tomorrow. Equal representation, protected sovereignty, mutual defense obligations, everything Earth's delegation has fought for since the war ended. And all it took was one broken jaw to start the process," Milo observed dryly. "That's an oversimplification," Varos countered, though without his former rigidity. "Your action was the catalyst, certainly, but the underlying conditions were already present. Vox's faction had overreached, alienating potential allies within the Alliance. Multiple species had begun questioning the power imbalance. You simply accelerated events." "Is that the official historical interpretation?" Milo asked, amused. "It's the diplomatic one," Varos replied with the hint of a smile. "Speaking of diplomacy, your new assignment has been approved by both Earth Command and the Alliance Council." He handed Milo a formal commission, Earth's first special envoy for interspecies relations, with authority to address emerging conflicts before they escalated to military confrontation. It was, Milo recognized, both an honor and a carefully constructed political solution. His actions had made him too visible to return to ordinary military service, yet too valuable to sideline completely. "And Dr. Kyle?" Milo asked, accepting the commission. "Appointed to head the new Xenobiology Research Initiative," Varos reported. "Her work on neural interface technology has been declassified and shared across Alliance medical networks. Quite revolutionary, apparently." Milo nodded, satisfied. Rhea deserved recognition for her courage and insight. Without her intervention, his act of defiance would have remained just that, a momentary disruption rather than the beginning of systematic change. A communication alert sounded softly. Varos checked his device, then straightened formally. "The Alliance Council session is beginning. As Earth's military liaison, I should be present." After Varos departed, Milo remained at the observation deck, contemplating the future taking shape around him. The Alliance was transforming, not without resistance and setbacks, but with genuine momentum toward more equitable governance. Earth's position had been elevated from resource-rich subordinate to essential partner, its unique perspectives now actively sought rather than merely tolerated. "Enjoying the view, Lieutenant, or should I say, Special Envoy?" Rhea approached, her medical uniform replaced by the formal attire of a research director. The past months had been demanding for her as well, as she worked to redirect the technologies she'd helped develop toward healing rather than control. "Still getting used to the title," Milo admitted, "and the responsibilities that come with it." "You'll adapt," she said confidently. "It's what humans do best." They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the sun began to set over the recovering landscape. In the distance, an Orion transport vessel descended toward the spaceport, its design modified to accommodate the preferences of multiple species, a small but significant indication of changing attitudes. "I received the final neurological scan results this morning," Rhea said eventually. "The enhancement compound damage has been completely reversed. No lingering effects on your neural pathways." "Good to know my impulsive tendencies are entirely my own," Milo replied with a wry smile. "Speaking of which," she continued more seriously, "Vox's trial concludes next week. As the instigating party, you've been invited to attend the verdict announcement." Milo considered this. He had not seen the general since that final confrontation in the transmission center. According to reports, Vox had undergone extensive therapy to address both his physical injuries and the neurological manipulation he'd experienced. The proud military leader had been reduced to a case study in how even the strongest minds could be subtly redirected toward destructive ends. "Will you go?" Rhea asked when he didn't immediately respond. "Yes," Milo decided, "not for vindication or closure, but because we need to understand exactly how it happened, how prejudice was weaponized, how legitimate security concerns were twisted into justifications for subjugation. If I'm to prevent similar situations in my new role, I need to see the full cycle of consequence." Rhea nodded approvingly. "That's precisely why the Council requested your presence. The symbolic value of the soft human showing compassion toward his former adversary hasn't escaped their attention either." "Politics," Milo sighed. "Some things remain constant across species." The observation deck illuminated automatically as darkness fell, the lighting designed to complement rather than obscure the emerging stars. Among them was Orion Prime, visible as a particularly bright point that seemed to pulse slightly in the evening sky. "Do you regret it?" Rhea asked suddenly. "Any of it?" Milo considered the question carefully. The path from that impulsive moment in the Grand Hall to his current position had been neither direct nor easy. He had suffered physically, risked everything professionally, and been forced to confront aspects of himself, both strengths and weaknesses, that he might otherwise have left unexamined. "No," he said finally, "I regret that it was necessary, but not that I did it. Sometimes the soft response is to bend and absorb. Other times, it's to demonstrate that there are boundaries that cannot be crossed without consequence." "A very human perspective," Rhea observed. "Precisely," Milo agreed, "and one the Alliance seems to be recognizing the value of, finally." As night fully descended, the stars multiplied across the viewing field, thousands of points of light representing worlds where the ripples of recent events were still being felt. Among them were allies and potential adversaries, ancient civilizations and emerging societies, all navigating the complex dance of coexistence. "What happens next?" Rhea asked, her question encompassing far more than their immediate future. Milo thought about the broken jaw that had started everything, a moment of defiance that had revealed both the worst and best possibilities within the Alliance. He thought about the softness that others had mistaken for weakness, and how that very quality had ultimately proven stronger than rigid control. "We continue adapting," he said simply. "We demonstrate that empathy and resilience aren't contradictory traits, but complementary ones. We show that being soft enough to bend is precisely what prevents us from breaking." As they stood together beneath the stars, Milo realized that this, more than any treaty or political arrangement, was the true victory. Not dominance or subjugation, but the recognition that diversity of approach and perspective created resilience across an entire system. The human capacity for both determined action and compassionate restraint wasn't a design flaw, but an evolutionary advantage, one that the wider galaxy was finally beginning to understand. Sometimes, it took a broken jaw to start a conversation, And sometimes, that conversation changed worlds.